Welcome to the Aerospace Executive Podcast, featuring in-depth conversations with executives, leaders, influencers, and journalists in this dynamic, high-stakes industry. Hosted by Craig Picken, founder of North Star Group, the boutique executive search firm for the aerospace industry. You'll learn how top aerospace executives are developing their people, competing for talent, overcoming challenges, and adjusting to industry trends to drive growth and profits. And now, let's join your host, Craig Picken.
Welcome to the Aerospace Executive Podcast. As always, I'm Craig Picken. Hey, today I've got my old and good friend, Hank Coates. And Hank is the new president of the Commemorative Air Force. The Commemorative Air Force, as most people know, is the organization that supports a couple hundred historic aircraft around the country. And it's an organization that's fantastic for inspiring kids and adults as to the benefits of aviation and aerospace. Hey, Hank, congratulations on the new role as president of the Commemorative Air Force.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. We've got over 170 aircraft across the United States and about 70 units, and we even have units in France and across the world that have their own aircraft. And it's really an exciting place to be, and a lot of exciting things going on, and a lot of travel. It's certainly, no grass grows under your feet here.
Yeah. So, you guys have been around. How long has the organization has been in existence? For what? 30 years now? 40 years?
Yes, over that. We had a name change about 9 years ago to the Commemorative Air Force, but yes, it's been around for a long time. It got started, actually, kind of interestingly enough. Some gentlemen saw that aircraft were being destroyed. World War II aircraft were being destroyed, and they were looking around and they're like, wow, we really need to preserve these airplanes and the heritage that goes with them. And so they bought the first one. I think it was for $1,900. And from there, it just kind of, it was a couple of little units here and there. And then it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And now a headquarters and an international presence. It really is an amazing group of people in an organization.
What's the mission of what's the mission of the Commemorative Air Force? I know it's a nonprofit, historic preservation aircraft, but it's got to be a little bit more. I'm sure there's a whole lot more involved that people really don't think about.
And it is. One of the things that we really, really want to emphasize and moving forward is we basically have three words that describe what we do, which is we want to educate, we want to inspire, and we want to honor those who have made great sacrifices for our country through flight. And the real key thing here is that word flight. It means so many different things. A lot of people hear flight and they just think airplanes and getting in an airplane and flying an airplane. But to whoever hears that or says that, it means something different. To some economically depressed young man or lady in an inner city, flight means getting away from a bad situation. To somebody that might be stereotyped and said, well, you can't be an engineer or you can't be a pilot, flight means freedom of the mind to be able to experience something that, maybe historically that person felt like they had a barrier to them. So we want to educate, we want to honor, we want to inspire through flight. That's what our goal is.
It's amazing. If you ever go to Savannah, Georgia, and you go see the Mighty 8th Air Force Museum, I took my father-in-law. He's 91 years old. And we went to the Mighty 8th, and they've got some B-24s and some B-17s and some post-Korean War bombers there. And you think about like World War II and being a bomber pilot or a bomber crewman and what it was like. And to think, it's really eye-opening. And it's nice to see
it really is
preserving that history.
And we've got a lot of those aircraft. When I was talking to some of our guys, we've got planes going over next year to to the Normandy celebration, and then they're going to go on over into Berlin for the Berlin airlift, the 75th anniversary of D-Day and the 70th anniversary of the Berlin airlift. And they did this. A couple of these guys did this a few years ago. They were flying across the North Atlantic in DC-3s or C-47s, and they said it was like 10 degrees below zero back there, non-pressurized aircraft. I mean, those guys really had to be tough. Just to operate the aircraft, it took a very special person to be able to physically maneuver the aircraft, but also to take the environmental conditions that some of these guys went through was just amazing.
Yeah, you think about 30 degrees below zero for 8 hours on a bombing mission.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
The stuff that's just unthinkable to us today. So I mean, it like I said, just going and seeing that museum and spending a couple hours there really boggled my mind.
One of the things that we're doing at a lot of our air shows, and we're doing here at the Wings of Dallas Air Show that's coming up next month, is we really like focusing on, look, the airplanes are cool, and everybody really loves the airplanes, but something that's starting to happen is called living history exhibitions, where people come in and they set up reenactors and people that have been collecting the equipment, the Jeeps and the half tracks and the flamethrowers. And there's a whole group of people out there that have some really, really neat things, and they want to show them. And we have reenactors, and the amount of authenticity that they go through. I mean, you look through their, the first aid kit on their belt, and it's absolutely perfectly vintage. And so that's what's becoming very, very popular at a lot of the upper end air shows that that work with the Warbird type venues. And so we're going to do that here in Dallas, and it's being done in other places. And it's just one more way of educating and bringing a different group of people into the fold, so to speak.
Cool. Hey, along those lines though, hey, look, kids are getting into video games and different things. As the population shifts, is the younger generation still as interested as you and I might have been?
Well, I think they hunger for that, actually, and that's one of the things that we've talked about here. Is when you and I grew up, we had heroes. We had John Wayne, and we had Audie Murphy, and we had all those guys that you could look to on the big screen, and they reenacted bigger than life. They portrayed bigger than life people. And if you look at the movies being presented by Hollywood, there's a lot of the crash bang excitement videos, but there's also been a lot of historic type movies about World War II and World War I and the struggles that ensued. And I think that young people today, yes, they are drawn to the video games and SpongeBob SquarePants, and they do have a lack of heroes, for lack of a better term. But I think that they are also hungering for learning about history, because the attendance at air shows has not gone down. It's a great family activity. It's safe. And we need to provide outlets for these young folks other than just video games and movies. And I think a lot of them, when they get there and they see it, especially if it's hands-on, like the living history, and they can walk up to a P-51 Mustang that flew in World War II and put their hand on it, maybe even go for a ride in it, it brings a level of clarity and so something they can actually touch and feel. Yep. It's not just a story anymore. And I think young people today, once they see that, it turns a light on in their head, and they go, wow, I can do this. And a young lady who's never really thought about being a pilot, and she's out there and she's seeing female pilots, and she's seeing, people like her that are doing these things. And she goes, I can be an engineer. I can be a pilot. And so I think that's a big part of what we're talking about when we educate and inspire.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, I was at the Iowa conference, the International Aerospace Women's Association, And you met the first female. I met the first female F-35 pilot, and she was saying that she was inspired by the very thing that you guys are doing. She went to an air show. She saw some World War II airplanes. She saw some other stuff, other airplanes, and inspired to be a pilot. And next thing you know, she's in the Air Force flying F-15Es, and then transitions to the F-35, and her career takes off. I met another young lady who flew. I couldn't believe it. She flew I think it was a Mooney around the world, and you're like, wow. So to think what you guys are doing to inspire people to be in our industry, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories like that, and what a lot of people don't know is there's a lot of stories, not just contemporary stories, but you take the Red Tail Squadron and the Tuskegee Airmen, and then the WASP, the female pilots that supported the Army Air Corps in World War II. Those are stories about flight. They're stories about people that wanted to contribute and initially weren't wanted. They were like, no, we don't want you to be a part of this. But then when they did become a part of it and they started contributing, not only were they wanted, but they were highly revered. I mean, the bomber guys loved the Red Tail Squadron.
No doubt.
And they loved the Tuskegee Airmen because they were some of the best. And so, a lot of times those stories of inspiration and breaking barriers that are historical, they get forgotten. They're forgotten in the midst of time. But what we really, really want to do is go, look, not only are there great role models of African Americans and females today in aviation, but look back at World War II. There's some great role models and stories from there as well.
Well, you look at, the Right Stuff, great book, great movie. You think about Chuck Yeager, a guy with no college degree who ultimately turns out to be one of the best flight test engineers and test pilots the world has seen today. Quite frankly, if he'd probably still be a pretty darn good pilot. By today's standards.
Yes.
It's crazy. It's the great the stuff that aviation teaches people. It's a lot of lessons that aren't taught. They're certainly not taught in Silicon Valley. And
the interesting thing when I was a flight instructor in the Navy several times, few years ago, I'm telling on myself, a lot of the guys, my fellow flight instructors, would kind of get aggravated at the young student Navy pilots. And, I told them, I said, guys, if you look back and you think about ourselves when we came through here, these guys, in many, many ways, have better reflexes. They think differently. They think faster. Yeah, you get frustrated at them for certain things, but they have so much more ability to learn. And because of you hear a lot of people talking bad about computer games. There are some very good things about computer games. It teaches you to learn quickly. It teaches you to learn to assess scenarios and to use hand-eye coordination to fix it. So, there are some very valuable things within the gaming industry that can be applied to aviation and vice versa that I think sometimes people tend to overlook. So it's the generation of today, the younger generation of today, they are very different, but there's no reason that that's a good difference or a bad difference. It just, we need to make sure that we utilize those differences in a constructive manner.
Yep, I got you. Hey, I mean, so obviously you got the Commemorative Air Force, you've got 170, older aircraft. What's the biggest challenge? How do you keep these things flying?
Well, we have 171, I think, today, aircraft. Almost all of them are World War II aircraft. I mean, there's a few T-34 Bravos in the mix, but most of them are World War II aircraft. We also have a fairly large number of privately owned aircraft that participate with us. The maintenance is done via either volunteer efforts or it's paid for and done, local mechanics or local FBOs and service providers, but it's paid for via the generous funding of our members. And I mean, it takes a whole tsunami of passionate, volunteers and staff and supporters to keep these airplanes flying. I mean, not only do you have, engines that have to be repaired and rebuilt, but, the older aircraft have fabric on them. That takes time, and then it has to be redone. Some of our units do a lot of that maintenance through volunteer efforts of the people there. But then, like I said, some of it gets actually paid for within the local aviation community.
Yeah. Now, what's the biggest challenge? I mean, obviously, it's kind of hard to find parts for an old, Pratt and Whitney reciprocating engine.
You'd be surprised.
Making them yourself? Do you guys have the engineering and drawings? Do you have, or are you recreating stuff on the fly?
You'd be surprised at the number of those older engines that are out there and at the parts availability. They do cost money, but there is a whole area within general aviation that utilizes a lot of these things. So that really, there are some types of aircraft that have a scarcity of parts for certain things, but in general, if you take most of our aircraft, we can generally get parts without too much trouble. And then if we can't, then we do have the engineering, the drawings, and I mean we could build a P-51 from scratch if we had to, but that would be a little cost prohibitive.
It's got to kill you every time you see you see the P-51s out at the Reno air races, and they're all jacked up, etc. And does that sometimes make you cringe?
No, not really. I'm going out to Reno in 2 or 3 weeks, and I'll be out there. Hey, look, those airplanes are flying, and they're doing the same thing. They're educating and inspiring, and they were in the 50s and 60s. That's a big part of what Reno was, and it's a big part of what air shows were. So there's a lot of authentic aircraft out there. There's a lot of models that are true to form and period correct. But those aircraft are doing the same thing. They're inspiring and they're motivating and they're showing, look, what kind of engineering goes into some of the stuff that they do to those aircraft. It's amazing. So it's their airplane. They're gonna have fun with it, do what they want with it.
Are you guys going to be able to take on some, post World War II aircraft, the beginning of the jet era, and any of the Sabres that are still left in the world, and whatever else? Do you be able to bring on some jets and support them too? Do you have them in the program?
We do have a couple of the World War II type aircraft like you're speaking of, but in reality, the Commemorative Air Force is going to have to change in time and over time, and we're constantly looking at aircraft, more modern aircraft. Right now, we're focused on the World War II aircraft, but as time goes on and as history catches up with us, we will probably start looking at Korean era aircraft and the Vietnam era aircraft, and expand our vision of inspiring and educating, because there's going to be a lot of people that are going to connect to those eras. I mean, right now there's a large group of people that we can educate that actually connect. Their fathers or even they were flew in these aircraft. When we did the dedication and the fundraising event and the unveiling of That Tall Brother, it's the C-47 that led the D-Day invasion at Normandy. We had 4 or 5 families that were there whose fathers were either the pilot or the surgeon that flew on that aircraft. And it's amazing the connection that these folks have. And so as time passes, we're going to probably start getting into Korea or Vietnam, but that's down the road. That's not what we're focused on right now, but it probably will be within the near future.
No, that's where's your, it obviously takes a lot of resources to support the organization. Is that coming from corporate donors, private money, just people reaching into their checkbook at an air show and supporting it, all levels? All
of the above. We don't have too many corporate sponsorships. We're exploring that. We've been in contact with people. For the most part, it's through the very, very generous efforts of our membership, private money, and then the everyday person that's a part of the group, of the organization. And then most of our bigger groups, the way that we're organized, we have a central headquarters here in Dallas. I'm looking out my window at the Dallas Executive Field. It's kind of a hazy day out there today. We have a few aircraft here, but most of the aircraft are spread around the United States. And each unit has unit members, and then each unit member is also a Commemorative Air Force member. And so it all kind of rolls together. All the aircraft are actually assigned by the Flying Heritage Museum that we have. They all fall under that. But it is a large, very diverse group of people, and everybody does what they can to help contribute to the mission. And some people have monetary funds available. Some people just have a lot of time, and they're able to contribute their skills either administratively or as a pilot or as a mechanic. And then each one of these units, I'm not going to say each one, but most of the units have an air show every year, which helps fund the unit for the next year. They have different fundraising events. So there's no one way that the money comes to the organization. It's through a lot of hard work and dedication of the volunteers.
Yeah. And how many volunteers are there?
Right around 12,000.
Wow.
12,000 strong. Yep.
Is there any so you think about your aircraft, I'm sure there's some stories out there. Is there any one airplane that's got a particularly cool story that makes people just go, wow, I never thought about it?
I think right now, all of them have stories. All of them are really, really amazing. The red tail aircraft and how it was damaged in an accident several years ago, and it was rebuilt from the ground up. That's an inspiring story from people. But right now, probably the most interesting story is the story of That's All Brother. And you can Google That's All Brother. It is a very interesting story. It reads kind of like a spy novel, actually, where there's a group in Oshkosh that takes old C-47s or DC-3s. They take the old piston engines off of them, and they put turbine engines on them, and then they fly around Alaska delivering stuff. And they're really cool airplanes. Well, there was one of them there that was there getting ready to be converted. And some gentlemen were looking at the serial numbers, and they were going, wow, that airplane has some history to it. And they realized that it was a C-47 that on the day of the D-Day invasion, it led the event. It led the D-Day invasion. And it had Lieutenant Colonel Donaldson. He was a commander of the 438 group. He planned he was supposed to be the pilot. So they all went in, and that aircraft led the invasion. And that's the one. It was actually slated to be, chopped up and modernized. And so we basically saved it from being. It would have lasted another 50 years probably as hauling cargo. But it is an amazing restoration. When you go in that aircraft, and like I said, you look through the small attention to detail things, like the little first aid kit. If you look at it, it is a first aid kit from 1944. It's amazing. The interior is as if the aircraft was brand new. It's pretty neat. And that aircraft is going to go over to Normandy with another large group of aircraft, and it's going to be reliving the D-Day invasion. And it's just it's an amazing thing. So they're going to they'll fly across the North Atlantic, go to England, spend a few days in England, then go to France, do some reenactments. Some guys are going to jump out of the aircraft, and then they're going to go to Germany to relive the the Berlin airlift, and then the whole gaggle is going to come back. So Basler Aircraft and Oshkosh are the ones that rebuilt this thing, and like I say, it was tasked to be rebuilt as a modern aircraft, but it went through an amazing restoration. It is complete, and it's been restored to last another 100 years, and it just tells an amazing story all the way through, from not just its participation in the Normandy invasion, but also how it was saved and how a large group of private funds and
just kind of
dedicated
saw the value. They just saw the value in an airplane. Did some research.
Yeah, Basler saw a value in an airplane, and they were fine with that. But then when everybody looked around and said, "Wow, wait a minute, this airplane's a unique airplane. It's got some history. Let's fix this thing." And it really is a great story.
Yeah, no, it's too cool. You see the history of these things, and anytime you see one junked in a field or whatever, you're like, wow, you wonder what the story is, and could it be brought back to life, and so many things like that. And it's like each airplane almost has its own personality.
And they do. That's one of the things that a lot of people don't get. These older aircraft, I mean, even newer aircraft to some degree, but these older aircraft, they may look exactly alike, but the engines start different. The systems are a little subtly different. They have slightly different flight characteristics, and most of them are pretty docile, but then they have something that they don't like. And these aircraft, in my opinion, these aircraft have earned the right to fly and to be a part of history and to be shown to people because they helped us too. I mean, these aircraft have a personality, and they're very unique. I find them to be very, very inspiring. I really do.
It's awesome. Hey, can we switch gears a little bit?
Sure.
So you were before the Commemorative Air Force. Obviously, when you and I first met, you were the president of Aerosim Flight Academy.
Yep.
And you look at modern day aviation and pilot training versus 60 years ago, 70 years ago, during World War II. What's the challenge ahead for pilots and flight training, and what are you seeing out there? I mean, there's no bigger expert than you.
Well, it kind of gets back to our mission of inspiring and educating. And something I said earlier today, a lot of young people grow up and they are not exposed to airplanes like you and I might have been. And there's not a romance of flight like there was in the 60s and 70s and 80s. Not in the United States, anyway. In Asia and in many parts of Europe, being an airline pilot is still a romantic kind of a job. It's held at a very high social esteem. The pay is very good. And in the United States, it's not quite that way anymore. There's not a lot of role models for people to see, like you talk about Chuck Yeager and the movies that we saw when we were young, The Right Stuff, and the John Wayne movies, The Flying Tigers, and Bye Bye Black Sheep. So a lot of young people today don't realize that there is a great career out there in being a pilot or an engineer. And one of the things that we did at Aerosim was we started doing open houses once a quarter to get the kids in there, let them fly a simulator, let them see what a real airplane was like, and understand that, it's a great job. The pay is getting better at the regionals all the time. There was a significant barrier to entry from the standpoint of funds for young people, but that is that's improving every day. And my inside baseball friends are telling me that that's going to, I think, change very much within the next 3 to 6 months. So we just need to get the young people out there and educate them about the opportunities as engineers, as mechanics, to be a mechanic in the airlines. Those are some great opportunities out there. And just to say, hey, you can do this through education, through inspiration, through outreach programs. We do summer camps here and at many of our units. We work with the schools to do the same thing. We're going to try to leverage D-Day Brother and the D-Day evolution with That's All Brother, and show people, look, this is what it was like, but you know what? This is what it's like now, and these are opportunities for you. But I think it's really, really important for our country that we understand that there is a problem. There's a pilot shortage. You and I have been talking about this for 8 or 9 years now, that it's there and it's coming. Well, now it's here. And the only way we fix that is by teaching the younger generation that these are the opportunities. It's a good job. There's good pay, and engineering as well. And to be honest, we're kind of falling behind we've got a lead in aviation, and it's a pretty solid lead, but that lead is diminishing. Asia is eating into it, as well as Europe. And if we're not really, really careful, we're going to find out that one day we're going to wake up and we're not going to be the world's leaders in aviation.
Is one of the terms, I mean, obviously you talk about cockpit technology, and it's pretty amazing now. I mean, not pretty amazing, it is amazing.
Yes.
And are we getting a little ahead of ourselves as far as, is there too much technology in a cockpit?
I don't.
Does it erode the skills of the pilots?
I don't think so. I do think that there is an issue there. I can remember flying in the Gulf War when the GPS that we had was a box. It was about the size of a loaf of bread that we carried with us, and it was just digital. You still had to translate it. Still had to translate that into a map. But the young people of today are so good with utilizing resources and video. They can go through these programs and through the glass cockpits and manage those resources very, very well. I do think that for some people, what they tend to do is they tend to focus inside, and they're looking at that pretty CRT there in front of them, and they're not looking out, paying attention to what's going outside of the aircraft. Back when I was a flight student, they always said aviate, navigate, and communicate. And I think sometimes people in here they're, I don't even know what the word for it is. They're videoing, aviating, and communicating. So I do think you're right. There is an issue there. I think the young people of today have a better ability to handle that. But a lot of this equipment it is so much better than anything that we ever had. Their navigation is absolutely precise.
Yeah.
The new traffic ADS-B systems where you can avoid collisions, it's amazing. It's much, much better than the systems we had in the Navy. So yeah, there are some drawbacks, but I think the benefits far outweigh the risks. And I think more of the risks lie in the older generation guys like me that tend to get fixed on, wow, that's a pretty screen. Look at all those colors. I'm the guy that needs to be looking outside the cockpit, not inside. Right.
Yeah. No doubt. You think about, I was talking to one guy who flies a global. I'm like, well, he's like, hey, look, when the weather's bad, we're flying a lot on systems. When the weather is good, we turn the systems off and we hand fly the airplane and challenge each other with various emergencies. Look, there's no one answer. It's variety is the spice of life, right?
Yeah.
So that's cool. But hey, so what's so you're week 5 into the new role. What's the big what are the initiatives for the Commemorative Air Force moving forward? What do you and your board of directors really want to accomplish over the next 3, 4, 5 years?
Well, right now, one of our biggest things that we're looking at is building a museum here in Dallas. We moved the headquarters from Midland several years ago to here in Dallas. We've got a nice headquarters building, big hangars. But one of the things that we're working on right now is raising funds for phase 1 of the headquarters museum. Some of our units have museum activities, but this is going to be a museum that is going to focus a lot on education. It's going to have a lot of aircraft in it. It's going to have parts of aircraft in it, and it'll be phase 1. So we're working hard. Hopefully we're going to break ground early next year to do that.
Yep.
And so right now that's the big focus for me. It's learning the organization, learning the people. It's very, like I said, complex organization and complex systems, and it's just the day-to-day activities. I mean, I look at the next month, and for the entire next month, I'm going to be doing something every weekend. I'll be at the Wings Over Dallas Air Show, October 26th through the 28th. Then we've got the Parade of Warbirds here in Dallas, not this weekend, but next weekend. Reno the next weekend. So it's one of those things where, you're taking a swing at the tree every once in a while you're constantly working to further the efforts of the overall education, overall unit, but always focusing on that education piece, because the education piece is really, really valuable.
You're getting it sounds like you're getting a lot of local support. I mean, Reno, Dallas, all the local air shows around the country. It sounds like you do get a lot of local support from the people. Yeah,
you get there's a lot of local support here in Dallas for the organization, and we're working very, very hard to leverage that even more. Like I said, we're about 80% towards our goal of fundraising for the museum and the education center here, and that's going pretty well. And then each unit is kind of interesting. There's local within the unit support, and that's great, and we encourage that. And then there's national support for the headquarters. It's a very diverse group of people, and the headquarters is there to help support those units. I mean, we have a vice president of operations and safety who goes out to each unit, standardizes the pilots, and we have each aircraft answering into a formal database to make sure that the aircraft are, that they are current, and that the 100 hours and the annuals are being done. So there's no shortage of things to do around here, I promise you.
Yeah, no doubt. How can people support your cause? How do they find y'all?
Probably the best thing to do is we've got a brand new website. I want to make sure that I say this right. I know that I am, but it's a brand new website. It's commemorativeairforce.org. commemorativeairforce.org. And if you just do a Google search of Commemorative Air Force, that'll bring you to that site. We have a lot of aircraft on there, the locations, the events, our schedules. We're also on Facebook. We have a lot of outreach efforts on Facebook. You can look me up, Hank Coates, on Facebook, and go to the Commemorative Air Force via that, as well as I'm on LinkedIn under Hank Coates. So, a big part of it is exactly what you're talking about. Education is getting the word out and talking about the missions that we're on, and being able to fly in a P-51 Mustang at some of our events, or flying in That's All Brother, or flying a B-17. It's not something you get to do every day. It's kind of exciting.
Yeah, no, I mean, it takes a lot of resources to keep it happening too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So cool. But hey, thanks for taking some time to be here with me today.
Anytime, brother. If I can ever help you out in the future, you let me know.
Yeah, and likewise, I'm gonna get on your website. You'll get a donation from North Star Group here this week, and
I really appreciate
look forward to helping the cause. And I hope other people who are listening to this will support y'all as well. It's really an important organization to keep the industry moving in the right direction.
I really appreciate it.
Young kids.
Yeah, and that's to me that's the most important part, is seeing those kids' faces light up, during some of our summer camps and the evolutions that we have. And something that's really, really amazing is our Red Tail exhibit. It's the Rise Above program, and we do so much. And to get that information out there, we really appreciate your efforts to do that for us. I really do.
No, it's all good. So cool. Well, hey, good luck at Dallas this weekend and Reno next. And man, I'm sort of jealous. I wish I had to travel every weekend to an air show.
It's fun, but it's going to get a little much. Anyway, anytime you're in Dallas, please come by, and then I'm sure I'll see you out and about here in the near future.
You got it. Thanks, Hank.